So let's start out with the morality of Acts. It's just a one-slide intro to give us an idea of where we're going. Now, why we are always thinking about human acts, okay? Growing a beard is not a human act. Tripping and falling, not unless it's been provoked, is not a human act, okay? These are things that are voluntary and free. So human acts are moral because they determine the goodness or the evil of the person who performs them, okay? So moral acts, human acts, are moral because they determine the goodness or the evil of the person who performs them. And you should hear in that sentence that we're talking about evil and moral acts, not evil and moral people, okay? So we're making a distinction between what somebody does.
Goodness or evil?
Yeah, goodness or evil in the person who performs them. Yes?
What are human acts?
Well, they're going to be, you'll see, I'll give you concrete, but it would be anything from sexual acts to stealing to doing something nice, bringing food to your neighbor, anything that's intentional and free, okay? We'll get there. Down below, I have a little more definition for that, okay? Just understand that what is not a human act are these involuntary things that happen to us, okay? So it has to involve our rationality and freedom somehow, okay? So moral acts spiritually define the person. This is kind of the idea that you are what you do. Moral acts spiritually define the person. This is why, the Catholic Church is so advantageous to culture character with an individual, all right? Because your moral acts will spiritually define you. So that's a self-contained thought. And it's a pretty honest assessment of how we become what we've done. Man wills who he is by his own decisions and actions. You become your own person, all right? For ill or good. Man wills who he is by his own decisions and his actions. So here, this will define a little bit here, Gabby. The morality of acts is determined by the relationship of man's freedom and rationality. So there's always this combination of those two that are brought bare. Okay? So there's no rationality involved in growing a beard. This is not. All right? Now you might say hairstyles and shaving, okay? You're doing something there and cultivate it, but the morality of acts is defined by the relationship of man's freedom and his rationality. And I just hope you can appreciate, again, once more, the level of integrity and respect that the Catholic Church has for the individual. I mean, they expect you to bring this to bear on what you're doing in your world and in your life. Okay? If you remember Matthew 29:16, this is the young rich ruler. All right? So he asked the one question that every Christian wants the answer to. What good must I do to enter eternal life? What good must I do to enter eternal life? Notice he's talking about a moral action. Okay, there's something there that's intentional, involves his rationality and his freedom. What good must I do to have eternal life? If nothing else, you should be able to draw just out of that single sentence that man's moral acts have a bearing on man's final end. Man's moral acts have a bearing on man's final end. We will stand accountable. If you can remember back to the beginning of the sacraments course, and I gave you the distinctions between extrinsic and intrinsic justification. All right? So in Protestant theology, you are justified or saved extrinsically. You're declared just and right. It's not a bearing on you as an individual. So this would not fall into that realm. Catholics believe in intrinsic justification. It's not working your way to heaven. You're not earning things here. You're cooperating with grace. All right? So this is extremely important. Len noticed earlier that you'll give up free will if you don't accept this. Yes, sir.
And just to clarify, you like under the Catholic point of view, you can lose your viability.
What do you mean? You mean like you can lose your eternal life? Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yes. Okay. So if you it's way beyond the discussions here, but if you want to read Martin Luther's, Bondage of the Will, and his discussions with Erasmus, in other words, there's not operative free will. There's different levels of free will. Oftentimes with Martin Luther, sometimes it might be not right, but they'll call it single predestination. In other words, you're destined for God, but you could lose it. Other groups, like the Calvinists and such, will say that it's not up to you anyway. Okay, it's really up to God's sovereignty, and you're the elect or you're not, and it has nothing to do with your good works. There's always the issue then between Catholic and Protestant theology. Just so you know, we're not talking about earning anything here. All right, we're talking about cooperating with grace. So, but that's another issue. I just want to make the point that our acts have some bearing on our end. Okay, so here's what every moral act must be. When we say ordering, we're talking about like directing it, right? When I put things in order. The ordering of man's acts must be rational, free, conscious, and deliberate. That's a moral act. If it is not rational, free, conscious, and deliberate, we're not really talking about the same thing. Now, again, just think of the level of respect that the church has for you as an individual. You're a creature that can rationalize what you are to do. You are free to choose it. It's a conscious decision, and it's deliberate. I have stepped forward deliberately. If somebody pushed me and I just caught myself, that would be an entirely different situation. I'd be lacking free will. Okay? So the ordering of man's acts must be rational, free, conscious, and deliberate. Okay. One quick sentence before I introduce you to the three moral fonts. The moral fonts ensure that human acts are ordered towards God. Okay? The moral fonts ensure that the human acts are ordered towards God because He's our final end. All right? There are three moral fonts. A font is a source, so these are often called the sources of morality. These things have been worked out over quite some period of time, often to help priests in the confessional. In other words, how do we determine what happened, level of guilt, and such? And you'll see, bless you, tomorrow how they're distinct from other ethical systems. Okay, so the first one is the object. An object, like what's my objective? Think of it in that terms, not like it's a physical object. What is my objective? This is the what. We have to start out by saying, what is it that they did? All right. So the object is defined as the goal of the person. But it's very important. Now, last part of the sentence you can't leave out for a good definition. It considers the total aspect of the act. It considers the total aspect of the act. It's not just what you physically see. There's other things that come into bear. All right? So, I've been using this example. Let me continue it here. I set my phone down over here. And I know even though it says envelope up there, I should flip it around. And Ian stands up, picks my phone up, and walks out of the room. That's what physically happened. But we don't know yet what the object is. Okay? If I had asked Ian beforehand, when you go out of the room, can you take my phone over to Jeff, the IT guy? What would be the object that he did? What did he do? He did a favor for me. That was perfect. That is the object. What if I never said anything to Ian, and I wasn't even looking, and he walked over, took my phone, and walked out of the room? Now what is the object of that act?
Stealing.
Yeah, stealing or theft. Okay, do you see? You can't just say the object of the act is the physical observation. The object is not Ian walked up, picked the phone up, and walked out, because that doesn't tell us much. All right. Now, I've been using, examples in human sexuality because it's very clear. Let's say that I tell you there are two married people having sexual intercourse. What is the object of that act? Well, we don't know. We don't really know yet. The next question is, are they married to each other? If I said they're not married to each other, what are they doing? What is the object of that act? Adultery. If I say they are married to each other, we can say conjugal love. What if I say neither of them are married? Now what is the object of the act? Premarital sex, fornication. Okay, do you get it? So you need something more than a physical aspect. But what we're just saying is what is happening. That's the first thing we got to determine before we move on, all right? So the next font, yes?
Did you give the first, like,
Where, here?
yeah.
Yeah, it's considering the total aspect of the act. It considers the total aspect of the act. So it's not just the physical observations.
And the second one?
Well, that was
just the example?
that was the example, correct. We're going to do these individually, then we'll do them for what do you want to say, a scenario. The second moral font is the intention. So do you see how the church is already, you should be gathering, it's important why we do stuff, all right? The intention really speaks to the why. Why did Ian take my phone out of the room, okay? Now, we define the intention as this is why the person intends to perform the object of the act, if you want to say it. What's that?
Can you reword that?
Well,
It just kinda
this is
confusing.
why the person intends to perform this.
Perform
See, this is the object.
the object of the act?
This is the object of the act, your objective. What are you doing? The intention is why you're performing that.
So is it why you're performing the act or why you're
No,
performing
no, no,
the
it's
object of this act?
the object of the act. That's what I said, though.
Okay.
Okay.
It's just confusing. It didn't really make a lot of sense.
Well, the object is what you're doing. If you want me to reword this is why are you doing it, okay?
Okay.
Why are you doing it? So let's work it out. Let's say that Ian was taking my phone to the IT guy, Jeff, so it was actually, he was doing me a favor. What might be Ian's intention? What are possible intentions? Just make it up. What are possible intentions?
Being a nice person.
He's a nice guy. I'd be more than glad to do that for you, Mr. Bujno. What else might be his intention? Can you think of one that's not as nice?
Get on a teacher's good side.
Yeah, he's sucking up, right? So we don't know that, right? You can't know that by observing. That's something that you work out in, in a relationship of discussions, okay? Now, before we move on, I didn't tell you this. We have to determine as we move on whether or not they're good or bad, licit or illicit, right? So if you hear me use the word licit, that means good. If you hear me the word illicit, that means bad. So in the first scenario, if Ian is taking it out, doing me a favor, that's good. That's licit. If Ian is taking my phone out and he's stealing it, that's bad. That's illicit. With the intention, if Ian is doing it because he's a nice guy, that's good. If Ian is doing it because he wants to just score brownie points, that's bad. Okay? So do you see how you can have a good intent, you can have a good object. He's doing me a favor for the wrong reason. All right? So all those things come into bear. Two people that are not married, that are engaged in sexual intercourse, what would be their intention? What is their intention? Why do people have sex? What are they trying to express to each other? Yeah, they love or sentiment, right? Pleasure. Are those bad things? Not at all. They're good things, right? So we wouldn't say that two unmarried people, even though that object is bad, their intention's probably good. We can likewise say that two people that are married to each other, in conjugal love, that's good, but what if the woman isn't even in the moment? She's actually thinking about another guy at work. Do you see how the intention changes? Okay, now the intention's bad, all right? So we have to look through these. It's slightly analytical, but this is how we're determining whether or not something is good or bad. The third and final font are the circumstances. These are the who, the when, and the where, right? These are the who, the when, and the where. Yes, sir?
I was going to say, what if the person's doing something bad for a good reason?
Well, wait till we get to the top of the next slide, and that'll answer your question, okay? But that's a good question. That's the question we have to answer, so you're right on the target there. The circumstances are the who, the when, and the where. These are all of the other factors surrounding the moral act, or the human act, let's say it that way. These are all the other factors surrounding the human act. They're important. You can't take the circumstances out, okay? And I'll show you exactly why that is. These are all the other factors surrounding the human act. All right, so Ian is a nice, he's doing me a favor. That's good. He's doing it because he's a nice guy. That's good. What would be the circumstances surrounding that? Who is it? It's Ian. Who is Ian? What is Ian? And what's his relationship in this building? He's a student, right? I'm a teacher. It's my phone. So you'd work out all those circumstances, okay? If we take the married couple, they're married to each other. It's conjugal love. They want to give each other their love. So they have a good intention. It's a conjugal love. It's a good object. They want to give themselves fully and faithfully and freely to each other. That's a good intention. But what if they're not in a private location? Do you see how the circumstance changes? In other words, that's not appropriate for a movie theater, okay? I'm not trying to be crass, but I'm trying to say is the circumstances there would become into bear on the moral act, all right? So when you determine what an act is moral, licit, or evil, illicit, or bad, you need to take in, first answer, what is it that they are doing? Why? Now let's do a concrete case. Casey, can you see that pretty well? Would you be so kind as to read it?
All of it?
Yes. Well, either you read it or they all have to write it down.
I mean, I can write it down.
Oh, they want you to write it down. You comfortable reading it?
Yeah.
Somebody's read it every class. Okay, because I get tired reading it. Go ahead.
Gloria's hands were sweating. She was 15 minutes into her math final when she began to panic. This exam is worth 50% of her grade. She understood math, even liked it, and usually did really well. Her constant problem was that she wasn't a strong test taker. Her grades never reflected her understanding of the material she studied. Now here she was, once again stuck on one problem worth 25 points on the test, and she was drawing a blank. She put her head down on the desk and concentrated as hard as she could. She remembered doing a similar problem in class and explaining it to her friend Jessie. But now she was so stressed out for the test she couldn't even remember how to begin this particular problem. She lifted her head and stared at her test. She watched the clock tick on the wall while imagining her parents' expression when they received her grades. Gloria is a first-generation college student in her family, and this is her way of showing how appreciative she is for the love and support her parents have given her. Jessie was sitting right in front of her. He is always a good test taker and had already solved the problem. The teacher had his back turned and was on the other side of the room. Gloria could look over Jessie's shoulder and no one would know. Gloria needed to think quickly. She thought about how unfair it was that she regularly does badly on tests even though she works so hard in class and understands the material. She thought about how often she helped Jessie in class throughout the semester. What should she do? She prided herself on doing what was right, but how right is it that she has to work in a system that doesn't reward such hard work and punishes her for the weakness of not being a good test taker she is not responsible for? Finally, she took a deep breath. She looked to see the teacher was still on the other side of the room and glanced over Jessie's shoulder just long enough to get the method and final answer to the question. Her answer was correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the first moral fun. What is the object? What did she do?
Cheat.
Okay, it was cheating, okay? So is that licit or illicit? It's illicit. Okay, so if we wanted just to determine the morality of the act, as individuals, we love giving all the other stuff around it, but we already know at that point, we're done. What was her intention? Now there's multiple intentions, so there's a couple written in there. Why did she want to do this? Why did she want to cheat?
To get a good grade.
She wanted a good grade, that was one.
To show her parents she appreciates them sending her phone.
Yeah, it was to affirm her parents' love and concern for her grades, okay? Are those bad or good intentions? They're good intentions. To get a good grade and to affirm your parents' support are good things. What were some of the circumstances? And then we're going to show you how the circumstances can even change the guilt.
She's a bad test taker.
She's a bad test taker. Yeah. What else? Go ahead.
She helps him all the time and tells him what to do.
How about that? She might even have helped him understand this stuff before they sat down to take the test. All right. I'm guessing, I was imagining this was in college, but it's certainly a school situation, right? Where does Gloria sit in relation to Jessie? Right behind her. Now, we would understand that, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to look over somebody's shoulder, right? What if I change that sentence to Gloria sits 4 desks behind Jessie, and she still managed to somehow drop a pencil, get a paper, and go up? Doesn't that sort of implicate her a little deeper, right? You see how a circumstance can fit in there? So we would look at this, and we sense her intentions were good, and the intentions draw us in emotionally, right? Because we can relate to this. And let's face it is unfair. She knows the material, she just, doesn't do well under pressure. So it's almost like it draws you in emotionally, but then we start making decisions based on sentiment and not objective truth. So this isn't some grave evil that she's going to suffer eternal damnation for, but nonetheless it's still a morally illicit act. All right? This seems pretty straightforward. You get it? Good. Good. Very good. That's it, guys.